Hey folks, Robert here. Homemade bread. 5 cups of all-purpose flour. This makes 2 really good sized loaves. 2 really big loaves. These are my bread pans I use, just standard bread pans. Ain't nothing too fancy. So, anyway, get the flour. I'm going to mix up the ingredients and I'll show you that in a second. So we got our bowl, 1.5 cups of lukewarm water, we got a package. I use just this yeast, quick rise, 2 eggs well beaten, so bear with me. Okay, this recipe also calls for 2 eggs well beaten. So, beat the eggs, and then we'll be back. This also calls for a package of yeast, so I use about, I don't know, 2 teaspoons full. My water, the water, sugar, yeast, and salt all goes in at once. So there's the salt. Sugar is about, I don't know, it calls for a 1/4 cup of sugar, but I use anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 because I like my bread a little bit sweeter. You guys know how I roll with the sugar anyway. All I do is just beat it up. The reason I like the quick rise yeast is because it's smaller around and it seems to mix up better in the water when you first put it in than the normal yeast does. And I mean, it rises a little bit faster, I guess, too. So that's what I do anyway. I usually try to do the yeast and the sugar, the salt, and the water first, and then I'll let that set, and then I'll mix up my other ingredients. Like I'll beat my 2 eggs, and I'll melt my. It calls for vegetable oil, but I use shortening sometimes, and sometimes I use butter. Sometimes I use a combination of vegetable oil, shortening, and butter. So whatever I decide to use at the time, and it calls for 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. So I got that pretty much mixed up. So this is a 1/2 cup thing, but we'll just use the guesstimation process. So that's close enough. So pour that in there. Get rid of that. Mix this up. I'm going to mix it in with my other ingredients. Put my yeast back in the fridge, and gonna need a spoon. Bring your flour back over. Start pouring it in and mixing it up, I guess. Sometimes you might have to add more flour. We'll see how it goes once we get everything started to mix up here. You want a dough that's kind of the consistency that it really follows a spoon around the container. So most times you'll have to add a little bit more flour as you're doing it. So it's always good to have a little extra flour on hand, which I'm going to get here in a minute. No rings or anything on your hand. The best you can do is just have a little bit of flour in the cup to add over. This is a 1.5 cups. So once you get to a certain level, I'm just going to mix it up with my hands and start pouring it in. All right. Mix it all up good. What you want is a dough that don't really stick to your hands. You just want it to roll up into a ball real good. You knead it real good. And then you cover it when it's done. And after you knead it and have it all mixed up well, you cover it and let it set until it roughly doubles in size. So once that's done, you punch it down, cut it up, put it in your pans, grease your pans real good, and then slide it in the oven at 375 for 25 minutes, and you watch it. Once it's golden brown on the top with the color you want, you're done. And see how the dough forms a ball you can almost pick up and manage without it sticking to you. That's kind of the consistency you want your dough before it rises. That's the way I like mine. It actually makes the bread fairly thick, and I used that much out of that cup at the end process. So about another quarter cup of flour is what I used. So anyway, we'll cover that and let it rise in a warm place for a couple hours, and then it should be good to go. Anyway folks, I'll be back when it rises up and I'll show you. Hey folks, there's the dough. It's all risen up. I didn't quite show it to you when it was risen, but that's it. So I punch it down, take half of it, cut it off, take the other half, slap it in my other greased bread pan, get rid of that. Then you just spread it out like that, punch it down, and I like to butter the top of mine because that's just how I roll. Can never have enough butter or sugar, if you ask me. Anyway, cover it back up, let it rise until it rises up about this high, and then you can slice the top of it, or you can just leave it like that and slap it in the oven. I'll be back. So there's the finished product, folks. I just butter up the top a bit, make it a bit more moist, maybe the sides. You can cook it as dark as you want. I like mine a little bit darker, crunchier crust. That's pretty yummy. There it is. Homemade bread. That easy.